a few good men and women. The people served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and of the elders who outlived him, who had seen all the great things the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua died at the age of 110, and he was buried. After that, a whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, and another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. So Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsake the God of their ancestors who brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped the various gods of the peoples around them. They aroused the Lord's anger because they forsook him and served the Baal and the Ashtaroths. And in his anger against Israel, the Lord gave them into the hands of the raiders who plundered them. And he sold them into the hands of their enemies all around, whom they were no longer able to resist. Whenever Israel went out to fight, the hand of the Lord was against them to defeat them, just as he had sworn to them, and they were in great distress. This is a whole portion of the Bible I just as soon not deal with. But it corresponds to another portion in the Kings and the Chronicles, which is the same thing until Israel literally is destroyed. Because they never get it. Oh, they get it for a while. Cycle after cycle after cycle in the book of Judges. For the most part, they get things right, God delivers them, and it lasts for 40 years. One time it lasted for 80. But most of the time it lasts for 40 years. I got to thinking as I was sitting up here, what's that amount of time? 1975, I got married for the first time, September the 20th. That's going to be 44 years ago. That's about how long they can hold it together. A generation is about 25 years is how they measure it. So a generation plus 15. That's why it's so very important that Michael and Bree and Logan and Sammy and Kahana and Savannah, and if God blesses us with other kids, we got to help these kids get it right. Because basically what it's saying, if we don't help them get it right and it starts to slip, their kids are going to be more evil than the evil we're facing now. For some of you, I'm basically saying, do you want your grandkids to be that way? Isn't that what we were saying through this whole church revitalization thing? It's not about us. It's not even about our kids anymore. It's about our grandkids and their kids. Because, folks, we're just like these people. And the worst part of being like these people is the fact that we just let it slip a little. It's almost imperceptible, the slippage. And then all of a sudden, God isn't part of our daily lives. We sit down and eat a meal and we don't say thank you. Next thing you know, we don't think we have to go to church or Sunday school. God won't miss us for 1 week. And then it's 2 weeks. And then it's 6 weeks. It takes about 6 weeks to start a habit. You just gradually fade off away from Him. That's why it's a constant. That's why it's so wrong to say, well, I've been saved, or I've been baptized, or I've been confirmed, or whatever you want to call it. But what are you doing now? What are you doing with it? And what are you helping those to do with it who are following you? I know it's I'm supposed to be a cheerleader. This morning I don't feel like cheering. I was glad for those songs. I needed them. That first one I thought, okay, Lord, what are you trying to tell me? We started a thing at Westside today about Oasis, and what did they show us? They showed us a beach and an ocean. Did I do that?
Yep.
You know what? We're going to have to invest in, this is going to have to be on the list. Because this is the second, well, no, it says Gary, so it's the one I've always played with. Anyway, getting back to it. There's a beach and there's the ocean, and what do we got up here? First song, there's the beach, there's the ocean, there's a palm tree. Lord, take me to my oasis. He brought you this morning, didn't he? You look at what's going on out there. This is your oasis. And I'm going to start fighting harder to make sure that it is. We don't want to be like everything out there. You don't have to try to be that way. We have to be intentional to stay close. And it's still not going to be easy. I'm standing out on the front porch, watching the neighbors go by, watching them come out of their houses. And if God gives me an answer, none of us are probably going to like it. But I say, God, what we're doing is not working. What are we going to do for it to change here? I'm almost afraid for him to answer that. Now, we're being told by various ones to keep doing what you're doing because what you're doing people don't do anymore, and people are looking for that. I just wish they would show up. If they're looking, I'm sitting here going, over here! Guys, we've been planting seeds like crazy. And people are telling us they're interested. And then that one song said about quitting before you're supposed to. Okay, I get it. Keep on. I've been a little down the dumps about something else, and I get a phone call last night asking me to be somewhere else to where if I'd have been where I wanted to be, I couldn't have done it. Okay, Lord, you knew where you wanted me. You want to be someplace else. I called them up, and they'd give me options about what I could do, and I called them up with what I wanted to do, thinking, well, it won't be available, and I'll take care of that. It was available. So I'm going to sit down with another part of the faith family that I'm not with very often, and they're going to bless me, and I'm going to bless them. It was kind of like one of those one-and-done things. They'll never ask me back. They did. It's kind of like with the Ministerial Alliance. I keep thinking, this ain't going to fly, and it is. God is bringing a rebirth amongst the churches on the east side, realizing that they better get together and they better do it now. And the Ministerial Alliance has grown by 1/3 just in 2 weeks. It's amazing. It's amazing. People that weren't listening or were ignoring us suddenly are showing up. Because the Lord's beginning to tell all of them, you can't do this by yourself. We can't win this neighborhood by ourselves. And so, something that we've talked about and it's been there and it's kind of slipped away, we are beginning to have a real close working relationship with Table of Life again amongst the ministers. That wasn't happening. It is now. There's 5 of us on the same page. I don't know how many ministers they've got, but there's 5 of us on the same page. And then you throw in Jonathan Franklin down here, I am so sorry I didn't get to know that man sooner. I mean, he's pinned my tail to the wall. And Mary stood there and watched him kick it.
Hallelujah.
God is bringing it together. And it may not look like it in this building, but He's bringing buildings together. Talk about evil in the sight of the Lord. I want to give you an example of how evil that is. It came out on the news. It broke yesterday. Abortion doctor who lost his license and moved to another state. He dies. And what did they find in his house? 2,500 or so preserved aborted fetuses. Why? The depravity is beyond comprehension. But I'm here to tell you that the abortion industry had a name during Israel's time, and it was Moloch, the fire god, that they put their babies into him and burned them up as acts of worship. And those babies took place because of the pregnancies that came about through the sexual orgies at the altars of Baal and Ashtaroth, the fertility god and goddess. You've read those names. Did you realize that's what was going on? The only thing different today is we don't have temples to Moloch, but we got Planned Parenthood clinics, which are the same thing. And I'm not happy the man died, but I thought, oh my, what must have been an awakening for him when he faced his Maker. We don't want that kind of awakening for anybody. No matter how aggravated we are with them, no matter how evil we think they are, we still don't want them to go to hell. That's what makes us different. Because if we're not that way, we're just like everybody else. We should never tell anybody to go to hell or want somebody to go there. That's about the most depraved thing someone who calls themselves a Christian can do. And I know there's a lot out there. But I think back to and I hadn't thought about this book for a long, long time. Now suddenly everybody's reading it again. But I think back to the story of the shack. A rapist murderer murdered this guy's, used her horribly, this man's daughter. Now if that don't make you want somebody to go to hell, nothing will. But God basically says to that father, it's not for you to carry. It's going to destroy you. Give him to me. That may be what needs to happen on the mental health scene sometimes. Because you can hear all kinds of stories of abuse in all of its flavors and layers and forms. The only way we can cut you loose from that is to say to you, God says, give it to me. And that's something that we don't often want to do. We want to take care of it. Well, you know what I've discovered? Every time I try to take care of something, that makes it worse. Don't let Mary start telling you stories. She could tell you stories about me trying to fix it. And she's just bold enough, direct, that she'll say to me, nose to nose, I don't want you fixing me. Because the only is God. And so sometimes I need to just shut up and say, God, she's yours. And I know she says that about me all the time. She said something to me yesterday about, well, Penny didn't fix all your quirks. I said, no, she didn't fix my quirks. I just developed new ones. I've got quirks that Penny never saw. And Mary's getting to enjoy. So for 8 years, God gave them over to Cushan Rishathaim, king of the Aram. God says, you won't listen to me? Fine. Hold the pickles, hold the lettuce, special orders, do upset us. That's what you want? Have it. God will say that. And then people get mad at God. Well, you already struck a bargain and you don't like your bargain? So the first judge was the youngest brother of Caleb, Othniel. The land had peace for 40 years until Othniel died. Then you had Ehud, who went up against Eglon. Ehud was the left-handed guy, and so when you went in, they always patted you down on the right side. Well, he had his little old dagger on the left side, and when he went in to see Eglon, Eglon was such a huge guy that Ehud leans forward and says, I've got a message for you from God, and burp, into his gut went the sword, and the man was so fat, the fat went around the weapon and he couldn't get it back out. So he closes the door and leaves, and they left him there for quite a while because all of his staff and couriers thought he'd gone to the bathroom. So they didn't want to bother him. So Ehud was long gone before they realized he had killed the king. They had peace for 40 years. Again, Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So this time he sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Now Deborah, a prophet, women are allowed to speak. That ought to be real popular as that streams out there. God says women are allowed to speak. Some of you guys aren't going to like me later, but that's the way it is. So she tells her general Barak to go up and take Sisera, the commander of Jabin's armies. And Sisera's got these chariots with iron, which in those days was the top technology of their days. And these are foot soldiers going up against iron chariots. You think you're going to win? Barak says, I'm not going unless you go with me. Real good general. He does the one thing you don't do in that culture. You don't tell a woman, I ain't going unless you go with me. And so she says, because of the course you're taking, the honor will not be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. He doesn't care. I'm not going without you. I'm scared. Which is basically what he's saying. And sometimes they use the judge, or they use God, or they later going to use the Ark of the Covenant like a lucky charm. And that ain't Syria. And God doesn't want to be a lucky charm. He wants to be God. But when you don't want Him to be God, you kind of make it look like you still worship Him and you still like Him, but you pay attention to Him when you want to. How many of you, when you leave that door, you say, bye God, see you next week? You'd be amazed at how many people go to church do that. They don't give God another thought for the next 6 days. They don't open the Word. They don't talk to Him. Oh, they whine if something happens. They go running to Him if something bad happens. God doesn't want to be your insurance agent. He doesn't want to be your lucky charm. And He's not your Santa Claus sitting high up waiting for your list. That's not God. But that's what He is to a lot of people who call themselves American Christians. Because that's what he has been brought down to. To make a long story short, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan. The whole army was destroyed. Sisera is on the run. He goes to the tent of Jael, Eber's wife. He's exhausted. He asks for a drink. She gives him milk to drink, covers him up. He goes to sleep. He tells her to stand at the doorway of the tent. Somebody says, is anyone in there? Say no. And when he gets fast asleep and is really comfortable, she takes the tent peg and puts it through the temple and puts his head to the ground. Beware of a woman with a hammer. We're not going to go to any personal stories right now. So they found him tent pegged to the ground. And they had peace for 40 years. Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so for the next 7 years, he gives them into the hands of the Midianites, which is kind of interesting because the Midianites were relatives. When Moses fled Egypt, he went to Midian. And the priest of Midian at that time was a friend of God. Probably was a priest of the same God that Moses was listening to. And Moses ends up marrying the daughter of the priest of Midian, Zipporah. So the Midianites were kin. Well, now they're enemies. Sometimes that happens. Heard the Hatfield and McCoys? They were kin until they became bitter enemies. They cried out to the Lord. And he said, I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the God of the Amorites in whose land you live. But you have not listened to me. Did God say that to us? You're not listening. You haven't heard a word I've said. I probably do that because my earthly partner says to me occasionally, you haven't heard a thing I said. That's right, because I'm drifting off into another territory or thinking about a response. Guys, our number one problem is we don't listen. We think about responding. How do I know? I do it. And I know some of you do it because I've listened to the bantering back and forth between you and your mate when you didn't think I heard anything. I got to be careful to look at the floor because you all are going to think, what did you hear? You're all looking at each other. So then God goes to Gideon, who is threshing wheat in the winepress to keep it from the Midianites. Because when they would let Israel plant their crops, and when it was just about crop time, they'd come in and take all the crops. They'd send their herds across the land to eat up anything that was left. And anything was left, they'd burn to where Israel had nothing. That's how oppressed they were. So he's threshing wheat in the winepress. That's not what wine presses were made for. And the angel of the Lord shows up. Now, if I'm somewhere hiding and an angel shows up, that's about the last thing I need to happen. I mean, I get spooked at home when I forget Mary's there. And she comes up behind me and I about lose it. And she goes, have you forgot I live here? Well, there's been occasions when I've spooked her too. It happens. So can you imagine an angel showing up? I don't even want to think about it. I get scared enough with Mary, let alone an angel. God picks someone from the least tribe, the least clan in that tribe, and the least person in the family. Are you listening? He says to him, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And he's going, you talking to? Sometimes we've listened to so much of what the devil says we are that when God shows up and tells us what we are, we don't even recognize it. We think they're talking to somebody else. God shows up and He tells you, this is what you are. You better say, okay, and grow into it. Because I'm telling you, just before the service started, I'm out there on the other side of those doors, and the devil's saying, you're a worthless preacher. Half your congregation isn't even here this morning. That lasted for about 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden people started arriving. God doesn't judge our worth that way. God judges our worth based on are you doing what He's asked you to do, not on what is coming of it. Are you faithful? Is what He asks. It's not, are you successful? But all of us chase successful. And if you think that's not so, think about the niggling little thoughts you've had in your brain lately. And ask yourself, what side of the bed does that fall on? Are you being faithful, or are you frustrated because you're not successful as you see it? How do I know? I do that real well. So He prepares an offering, and God causes fire to flare from the rock, consume the meat and the bread right then and there, and then the angel disappears, and all of a sudden Gideon realizes he's been in the midst of divine presence. He goes, I'm going to die! And so God has to send him, no, you're not going to die. But normally when something like that shows up, you're going to die. That's the first thought that comes to mind, because you realize what it is. So the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the eastern peoples got together and joined forces. The Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon. He blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to join him, sent messengers throughout Manasseh, calling them to arms, sent to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. So he basically is calling all the northern tribes. And then you have this story about, have you ever heard somebody say, I'm going to place out my fleece? I know that's just old people generally that come around that because they knew the Bible story. So one of them was, I'm going to put my fleece out there, and if it's really you, Lord, let the dew be all over the ground, and let the fleece be dry. That's what happened. Lord, forgive me for testing you again, but I'm going to put the fleece out and let the ground be dry and let the fleece be wet. And he got up the next morning, the fleece was so wet he wrung the water out of it. I've had people say, that's awful. That's a lack of faith. Well, I know in living in this life, my faith keeps me going, keeps me from quitting. But sometimes I need to just know in a special way that I'm heading in the right direction. I just want to know. And I don't see that as a lack of faith. I see quitting or retreating as a lack of faith. But continuing the conversation with God is not a lack of faith. And by the way, God doesn't judge him for making that request. Not like he did before or later when Zechariah is going to get in trouble because he doesn't believe that John the Baptist is on the way. And so he has to stay shut up for 9 months. But Mary asked some of the same questions and God didn't shut her up. So there had to be a different intent in the heart. There's a difference between, I don't believe it, it can't happen, then I don't know how this is going to happen, but it's God, so here goes. There's a difference in that intent. And only God and the Holy Spirit knows what's really in your heart. And a lot of times, because I'm afraid I might really be getting in trouble, I say, Lord, I want to believe, forgive my unbelief. That's another story that's in there too. It's okay to admit that you're having trouble believing. But that you want to believe. It's kind of like we were taught in another setting. You have trouble forgiving? Then tell the Lord, I can't forgive, but I want to. You'd be amazed at what happens. A lot of it is the want to. A lot of it's the want to. There's a difference between want to and I ain't going to do it. Out and out, bull-headed rebellion. And God knows the heart. He knows when you're struggling. And He doesn't judge you for struggling. He will judge you for rebelling and quitting. But He doesn't judge you for struggling. Thank God, because I struggle a lot. $30,000 people showed up. God says, that's too many. With that many, we'll win the battle, and everybody's going to say, look what we did! But if God causes something to happen at Harvard Park, and we know what we are, we've got to know it's God. We're not going to say, look what we did. Because we could have done it. He told everybody that was afraid to go home. Now they all showed up. He said, if you're afraid, go home. 22,000 went home. God says there's 10,000 left, still too many. Take them down to the river, and we're going to have a test. So those that knelt down and scooped the water up and lapped it like a dog but were able to watch. And then the others got down on the knees and just stuck their head in the river. I heard one Bible college professor say one time, it was almost like God wasn't just a physical thing of them keeping watch, and the ones with their head in the river are going to get their heads cut off. But there might have been another analogy. The ones who, on both knees with their head in the river, had probably bowed their knee to the pagan god. And the 300 that didn't do that, God could use. I don't know. It's a suggestion. Almost 32,000 were sent home. 300 were left. God said, now we can do it. Now, if I'm Gideon, I'm probably thinking, are you nuts? But God and Gideon are close enough together that Gideon isn't thinking about the mathematical incongruity of all this. He takes the 300, divides them into 3 companies of 100, and here's what they go into battle with. Ram's horn trumpet in one hand, and in the other hand is a pot with a torch inside. They go into battle with a ram's horn and a pot with a torch in it. You think you want to go up against the enemy that way? Can you imagine the faith of those 300 guys doing what Gideon told them to do? That's amazing. And the Gideon still wasn't sure, so God says, "Would you go down to the camp? Night before the battle, go down to the camp and listen." He gets down to the camp and he's outside one of the tents, and he hears a man telling a friend, "I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such a force that the tent overturned and collapsed." The friend said, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and this whole camp into his hands." Can you imagine what that did to Gideon? Woo! So he positioned them around the camp. And he says to them, "Blow your trumpets, break the jars, and shout, 'A sword for the Lord and Gideon!'" And that's exactly what they did. You know what God did? Of course, you got all these heathen peoples together, and they're only friends when they are going against a common enemy, but they didn't really get along amongst themselves. So they didn't really trust each other. And in the dark, and all of a sudden you see all of these torches and you hear all these ram horns. I'm telling you, 300 ram horns is about to send you, because that roaring down the valley. The Midianites and the Amalekites and the eastern peoples turned on themselves, and God killed them with their own swords. Yea, God! Right? 300 to 100,000 was the odds. Yea, God. So I shouldn't have been standing out front and having a pity party before church started. Right? God could take the 20, 25 people in this room, and if we're tied to Him like Gideon was, 25 people can take Springfield. You all are looking at me like, Let me say it again. 25 people could take Springfield. And we're going to do it God's way, not some way we figured out. We're going to do it God's way, not some way we figured out. God's already done some interesting things. He's brought people together I never thought would get together, and I'm one of those people. God's put me in some positions that all I wanted to do was reach out to the preachers on the east side. I wanted to be part of the ministerial organization. I didn't intend to be one of the leaders. In fact, when they first brought it up, I said, "Are you kidding? No, we think that's what needs to happen." I said, "It doesn't make sense." And they said, "Oh, by the way, we asked your wife to serve too." And I said, "That really doesn't make sense. The two of us in one household, in one church, and you want us to be two of the main officers? Why?" God said so. I don't know why I doubt Him. He took a Christian church preacher and put him in the midst of the American Baptists, and they become my family. How could that have ever happened? God takes a rural white guy who doesn't talk the language and doesn't understand the culture and puts him in inner city Springfield and puts him in the middle of the ministerial alliance, which was traditionally all black, and has asked me to serve. That doesn't make any sense. But neither does this story either. I want you to know that there are stories like this, maybe not on as grand a scale, but there are stories like that going on now. And before we give up on America, let's understand God with about even 1,000 could correct the situation. It's not about numbers. It's about what power source are you really connected to. So God uses someone who doesn't think he's any good, and He uses that. And the last story is God uses a lustful, sex-driven man to lead the nation. His name's Samson. He was the Fabio of his day. You know that Italian guy that just looks like a 10 and he's got hair down to here, and the ladies are going, that was Samson. And Samson knew it. And Samson, if the woman looked good, he didn't care where she came from. But God used that sinful weakness to put Samson in as a judge and caused the Philistines more trouble than they'd ever known. He's mad over a Philistine wife that he thought was his and got taken away from him. In fact, he got mad first because if you want to learn about nagging, read the story of Samson. She nagged him and nagged him and nagged him and nagged him. That was the unnamed wife. until he gave up the secret, and it cost him 70 suits of clothing. And he said, if you hadn't plowed with my heifer, you wouldn't have found out the answer. So he went and killed 70 people, took the clothes off, and gave it to those people. So there was 70 Philistines gone. And then they really messed up and took his wife away from him. And so he got 300 foxes and tied their tails together in pairs and put a burning torch in their tail. And at harvest time, sent them out across the harvest fields and burned up all the wheat fields of the Philistines. And as if that wasn't enough, when they come to get him, and he plays with them. It's going to get him in trouble, but he plays with them. That's how the devil acts. He plays with them. And he ends up taking the jawbone of an ass, a donkey, and he takes that jawbone of that ass, and it must have been one stout jawbone, because he killed 1,000 Philistines with a jawbone of an ass. And then there's Delilah. By the way, you know, I used to say nobody named their daughter Delilah. They do here in Springfield. I've met a couple of Delilahs, and they're interesting. Because sometimes you live up to your name. And you know that story. I don't have to go over it. She nags him and 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 nags him some more. And he can't take it anymore. He's sick to his soul. And he tells her the secret of his strength. They cut his hair off. They gouge out his eyes because he didn't realize that in his sin the Lord had left him. God will come and go as we allow him to. But the Philistines and the devil aren't real smart. All the time he's grinding out grain as a blind man for the Philistines, his hair's growing back. And so they decided to make sport of him. They had a big celebration to Dagon, the man-head and fish-body god. Our Dagon gave us our enemy. And so they bring the enemy out and make fun of him as he stumbles around in his blindness. And he tells his hammer, take me over to the two main pillars of the temple. And Samson just puts his arms around those two pillars. Now, I don't know how many people were in the temple, but Scripture says there were 3,000 men and women on the roof looking down, having a good old time. And Samson asks God to enter him one last time and says, let me die with the Philistines. And he pulled the whole thing down on top of himself. And it says in his death, he killed more Philistines in his death than he killed his whole life. One thing I want you to take away from this morning. Gideon was a scared little person. Probably scared of his own shadow. But God used him to be a general to bring about great victory for Israel. Samson was a Hugh Hefner of his day. Wasn't a woman he didn't like. But God still used him to save Israel and bring vengeance on Israel's enemies. So whatever your excuse is today why God can't use you, you better just leave it at the door because we just shot it out of its saddle. I can say that. I got my boots on this morning. There isn't a single excuse that you can put out there that's going to stand up before God. So join me. Let's get off of our pity party and let's go ahead with what God's called us to do. And sometimes it's just one foot in front of the other. One foot in front of the other. Just keep moving. And don't go back. Don't spend your time looking back either. Yes, those were great victories. And we celebrate them. Yes, those were terrible problems, mistakes that we made, but they're not going to hold us down anymore. We're going forward. And God's the one that's going to decide how that goes. You've not been called to be successful. You've been called to be faithful. Let's stand and sing.